Hey y'all, Jeff Nowak here, WWL Radio and Odyssey digital sports producer, and I am here to go over the NFL draft, or at least how it pertains to the New Orleans Saints. As we all are probably well aware, the Saints made a move to add a second first-round selection, which makes my job, personally, trying to cover the draft on draft night, a technical challenge, because they're going to be drafting at 16 and 19. So we'll hardly even have time to react to the first pick by the time we have to turn the buses around and go try to figure out what happened for the second pick. And so that brings me to the point today, which is we're going to go through a quote-unquote mock draft, but it's not going to be your traditional mock draft. It's going to be a let's go down some roads and see where that takes us. In terms of draft strategy, in terms of targets, in terms of who you might be looking at 16, at 19. Will there be trade options? I don't think that there is a trade-up option that you're really looking at, but can there be a trade-down option? I'm going to go down 4 separate roads here, go through some different methodology, and see what we come out with. So first, I had to simulate the first 15 picks, which I did using NFLMockDraftDatabase.com. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It's a really cool website. My favorite thing about it is it's just a dude who really likes mock drafts, and he just sets up this website. It's got a great simulator. You can do a lot of things with it. You can save your mocks. I recommend checking it out. It's really well put together, and that's why I like to go back there. I've worked with this guy before, and we've established the first 15 picks, so let's go through them quickly. 1, Jaguars, Kayvon Thibodeau. 2, Lions, Aiden Hutchinson. 3, Texans, Evan Neal. 4, Jets, Trevon Walker. 5, Giants, Ikem Ekonwu. 6, Panthers, Kyle Hamilton. 7, Giants, Ahmad Gardner. 8, Falcons, Garrett Wilson. 9, Seahawks, Charles Cross. 10, Jets, Derek Stingley Jr. 11, Washington, Malik Willis, first quarterback off the board. 12, Vikings with Jermaine Johnson. 13, Texans, George Karlaftis. Ravens, number 14, Jordan Davis. And number 15, Eagles, a painful one, Drake London, wide receiver. So that puts the Saints on the board at 16. There's a lot of names still out there. You have Jamison Williams, wide receiver, Alabama. You have Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State. You have Treylon Burks, wide receiver, Arkansas. Right? You have a lot of names at positions of need that you could go after. That said, I do not think the Saints are going to go after wide receiver at 16 unless something else happens to prompt them to do it. In this case, I think you're sticking with the plan. You're building through the lines. And that's why route 1, need for need. You're going for need in this draft because the value aligns with what you need anyway. And if you're trying to break ties with prospects, it's the first place you look. Okay, we're even on these guys. Who do we pick? Well, Teron Armstead's now down in Miami. And there's no better fit or value than Northern Iowa's Trevor Penning, and he's my pick at 16, right? I watched him at the Senior Bowl. The Saints love taking kids out of the Senior Bowl. The kid's big. He's fast. The size and speed is legit. His RAS score is off the charts. He fits a position of need. He blocks mean. He blocks angry. He's exactly what you want, a left tackle, and that's who I'm going with at 16. So, okay, tick, 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 tick. Back on the clock. Now, we're still going need, right? And if you're looking at the position that Saints need to address the most, it's got to be wide receiver. I was tempted to go defensive tackle here, but Jordan Davis is off the board, and he's the guy, the Georgia defensive tackle with a perfect RAS score that if he's there, Saints are going to have a really hard time passing on him, even though they have that need at wide receiver. And it would drive people nuts, but I can see it happening if Jordan Davis is still on the board. He's not here. Okay, so then it becomes who gets picked at 17 and 18. In this mock, not taking wide receiver at 16 cost you because Chris Olave goes to the Chargers at 17. No wide receiver comes off the board at 18, which makes sense. The Eagles took Drake London at 15. They're not going to double up on wide receiver. They'd be crazy. So that means that your wide receivers left available, the top-end guys, you're looking at Jamison Williams, wide receiver, Alabama, and Treylon Burks, wide receiver, Arkansas. I think both of those guys have a lot of elements that you would love to incorporate into this Saints offense. The difficulty with Jamison Williams is you're already counting on Jameis Winston coming back healthy from a torn ACL, MCL. You're counting on Michael Thomas coming back healthy from the ankle injury that kept him out all last year. if you're trying to fill a need and you're trying to turn this team right now into a playoff contender, which I have to believe is the goal based on what the Saints have been doing, then it's tough to hedge on a guy who's coming back off of a torn ACL. So that's why I lean Treylon Burks here, a guy who can play out of the slot, who can make contested catches as well as anybody, which is a significant position the Saints struggled in, which is a significant area the Saints struggled in during the 2021 season. The guy's got hands the size of catcher's mitts. He can do all the things you need to out of that position. So he's the guy at 19. The Saints go need for need. They can come back at 49 and get a safety, get a bunch of other positions, but that's probably the most likely scenario for the Saints is you go offensive tackle at 16 if Trevor Penning's there or if someone else drops that you love, and then you come back and you go wide receiver. You handle the offense knowing the defense is in excellent shape, and you come back in the second round, you try to fill some of those holes. That's the simplest route. As we know, the Saints rarely if ever go the simple route. So that's why we have to go down a few other roads here. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's going to be my prediction, even though it feels like the most likely, because we're going to go down the board and we're going to say, hey, need is for suckers. The teams that draft for need are usually the teams that stay bad. Just look at the Giants drafting Saquon Barkley. Just look at the Giants basically every year. They struggle, and they struggle for very good reasons. And so that's why good drafting teams typically go best player available. And in this case, best player available is going to be Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, quarterback, Pittsburgh, guy on the board at 16 who you would probably get an argument from many is the top quarterback in this draft class. Malik Willis was the only quarterback off the board by the time the Saints got on the clock here. And so it gives you an opportunity to go out there and get Kenny Pickett. And if you think Kenny Pickett is the top quarterback in this draft and you love Kenny Pickett, then you take Kenny Pickett. And I know it's gonna irk the Jameis Winston hive. I know that. And I know you can make a very solid argument that you are setting Jameis Winston up to fail by drafting a quarterback behind him. It's the same reason Aaron Rodgers got mad when the Packers picked Jordan Love. You know, this is a team that thinks it can contend, and you have a better chance of contending if you build on offense. But quarterback is the most important position on the field, and you have to establish talent there. You have to plan. You have to build your talent pool, and then you can go from there. If Jameis Winston comes out and wins the job, the Saints are fine with that, even if it means you kind of wasted a first-round pick here, because you can move Kenny Pickett if you need to. But you only get so many chances to pick a quarterback you believe is the quarterback of the future, and if this is that, the Saints take it. Again, best player available. We're not talking about need. We're talking best player available. And so you're going down the board, 16, 17, 18. Well, remember when I said need meets value? Trevor Penning's still on the board at 19. I'm taking Trevor Penning here too. So you, in this scenario, have addressed the left tackle position. You've gotten the player who you believe is the best quarterback on the board, in Kenny Pickett. Now, do I believe that? We'll get into that. But you've got him. And then you have the 49 pick that you can come back and look at some of these really attractive wide receiver options. I think it could set up an awkward scenario where you have a quarterback who doesn't feel like you're committed to him. But we've seen this. That would not be outside of the realm of normalcy in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, the irony of Aaron Rodgers getting annoyed at the Jordan Love pick is Aaron Rodgers was Jordan Love. Aaron Rodgers got drafted behind Brett Favre, sat for 3 seasons, and then came in and was ready to play. And I think when you look at this quarterback class, what stands out to me is there are no NFL-ready players at the quarterback position. There are some prospects who could, I think, given time, come and make an impact. I don't think any are ready to start year one, and that's fine. And that's why you bring in a Jameis Winston, so you can kind of thread that needle of being competitive while also planning for the future. Now, will Jameis Winston be okay with that? That's the scenario that everyone has to figure out for themselves. Aaron Rodgers knows exactly what it's like to be a starting quarterback getting drafted behind a starting quarterback. And he still couldn't deal with it, you know? So that's the question. You know, has this been established to Jameis that this could be the route? How has he responded to that? How will he actually respond to that, regardless of what he might have said in that moment where he was trying to ink a contract? Who knows? But it's something to be prepared for because I think it could happen. I don't think it will. I would bet against it, but that's why you would do it, right? I mean, look at the 49ers. I mean, you can do it and win. You can draft a quarterback in the first round, not play him, and be competitive. 49ers made the NFC Championship last year, right? The Chiefs made the playoffs with Alex Smith as their quarterback, and then the next season went to Patrick Mahomes. The Packers made the NFC Championship with Brett Favre, and then the next year went with Aaron Rodgers. So, again, you can do it, but you can also end up like the Bears, and you don't want to be in a scenario where that first-round pick for next year that you have already shipped out ends up being a premium pick because you went after quarterback instead of filling holes. So that's where you run the risk there. Moving on. The fan favorite method of picking the Saints draft picks, and it's probably the safest method you could have of picking the safe draft picks, the relative athletic score route. It's a system that you've probably heard. It's one that the Saints have valued very heavily. Last year, they took Payton Turner, who was among the top end of the defensive end edge rusher RAS rankings. Year before that, they took Cesar Ruiz, who was at the top of the offensive lineman RAS rankings. And this year, I think you're going to see the Saints still value that chart. So, look around. Who is the top offensive tackle on the RAS rankings that we are using to drive this version of our mock draft? Well, it's a familiar name. It's Trevor Penning. When I say that size and the speed is legit, believe me when I say the size and the speed is legit. If he was at Alabama, if he was at a Big Ten school, this would be a top 10 pick. He went to Northern Iowa. He beat up on kids at Northern Iowa. Trust me, this is a guy who the Saints are going to be happy to bring in if they can get him at 16 or 19. I'd wager they'd go for him at 16. But if he's still on the board at 19, it becomes an even easier pick. So that's that. 9.96 out of 10. That is the best of all offensive linemen, all draft-eligible offensive linemen. And, hey, when need meets value, meets the relative athletic score, it seems like a layup, right? All that is to say, he's available in this mock draft. He might not be available on draft day, but he's pretty unanimously the fifth offensive tackle coming off the board in a majority of these mock drafts. So if all goes to plan, even in a scenario where only one quarterback gets taken in the first round, he should still be there. So the Saints are in good position at 16. So where do you go at 19? Well, tick, 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 down the clock. This is where fans will get a bit peeved, I think, if you're going by RAS and you're looking for the best athlete available at a position of need, at a position of value. Then I look over to Georgia. I look at that defense that was so dominant and is going to put 4, 5, maybe 6 picks in the first round of this draft. And I see Jordan Davis off the board, and I'm really disappointed about that because, as I mentioned, he has a perfect 10 relative athletic score, which kind of measures explosion, it measures speed, it measures size, it measures weight, it measures it's just a number, right? It's a way to accumulate all of these elements into one number so that you can get an idea of how one person rates next to another. Because it's difficult to just watch them move around and say, okay, well, there's nothing tangible here. All these guys are legit athletes. All these guys can run. All these guys can lift. All these guys can move. So you have to kind of rank them somehow, and this is a good way to do that. And so I'm not only sitting on Jordan Davis in that Georgia defensive line. That whole line, 8, and that whole line were studs. So I'm looking at Devontae Wyatt. He didn't have a perfect 10, but he came in with a 9.59, which would rank 3rd among defensive tackles in this group. And it just makes a lot of sense. It's a position that, while it's not talked about particularly extensively, it is a position of need. Defensive tackle is a position of need for this Saints team. It is. It's just not a sexy position, but it's one that you miss when it's not there. And the Saints are not exactly out of character if they go for a defensive tackle in the first round. It was 2016. The Saints took Sheldon Rankins with the number 12 overall pick. And Sheldon Rankins is, I would argue, the player that left in free agency and was not replaced last year. The others came at wide receiver and at cornerback. You replace the cornerback. They're in a good position at cornerback. You're getting Michael Thomas back, which is an addition at wide receiver, even though he's not new to the roster. And so you kind of have to decide if there's other positions of need where you're bringing in somebody. And if you have the best value at defensive tackle, a defensive head coach, a new co-defensive coordinator in Ryan Nielsen, bring in the big boy. Stop the run. This is still going to be a defensive first team, even if you bring in a wide receiver. The Saints aren't going to let that side of the ball atrophy. They're not going to let that side of the ball disappear because they desperately want a wide receiver. So that's why I go with Devontae Wyatt here. We have one more route, and it's going to be the don't mind if I do route of drafting. And it's going to end up with the Saints making a good number of people upset, which is something they do every year in the draft, it seems. So why change now? And that's they're going to get on the board at number 16. And they're going to select Desmond Ridder, quarterback out of Cincinnati. He's my top quarterback on the board. I like Desmond Ridder a lot. He's got the size. He's got the moves, the athleticism. He's got the arm. He wins. He's got a pedigree of winning. And I just like him as a prospect. I don't like him as a year one prospect because I don't think that any quarterback that is taken in this draft should start week one of next season. You brought in Jameis Winston. You're going to give him a chance to win that job. And again, if he plays well enough that you don't feel like you need to move on at quarterback in the next 2-3 years, great. You still need to try to develop quarterbacks. You still need to have options, right? So that's where I go here. And it's kind of built off of the idea of the second pick and how I'm going to handle that, which is I'm going to give you the Mike Detillier special. WWL's Mike Detillier the last couple of weeks has been hammering this idea that the Saints could potentially trade back because there is a ton of value in this draft, especially in the late first, early second, where you might add another pick. So what might a trade like that look like? Well, so you took a quarterback at 16. One of the main critiques of taking a quarterback at 16 would be, you added that second pick with the idea that you're going to fill holes and you're going to turn this contender into a higher form of that contender, into a team that can compete for a playoff spot. And you're going to do that by being cautious in free agency, but bringing in value players in the draft. By bringing in a quarterback, you really have kind of eschewed that. You're not doing it. So how can you kind of get there anyway? Well, you can take 19. You can take 49. Flip it to the Lions, picks 32 and 34, and then a future third-round pick. If you want to type that into a trade calculator, it'll end up about even. The Saints might come out a little ahead. But that's about the value you're talking about to go from 19 to 32, and you're keeping that 34. You're also adding a third-round pick in next year's draft, which, as you remember, they've already given away their first-round selection, so those mid-round selections are going to be even more valuable for them. So it works on both ends, and you still get to add 2 players who could potentially be starting caliber players. So in going further down this mock draft, here are a list of players still available when the Saints go on the clock at 32. And these are just at positions of need. This is not all the players available. There's some top end. You have Matt Corral still on the board, but you already took Desmond Ridder in this scenario. So we're not going to go through that. But these are the positions of need and players that you could add at those positions. First, defensive tackle. You have Devontae Wyatt, a guy who I was ready to pick at 19. So he's still there at 32. No brainer. DeMarvin Leal, Texas A&M, another defensive tackle. Travis Jones, another guy I saw at the Senior Bowl. Defensive tackle out of UConn, really good player. At safety, you get Daxton Hall out of Michigan, Lewis Seen out of Georgia, Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State, and then Jalen Petrie is another kid out of Baylor who could be a really intriguing option in this spot. Offensive tackle, this is where it gets a little light. This is where you start to question that because you don't have the top end guys. You're talking about Bernard Raymond, Central Michigan, probably the next prospect after Trevor Penning, but there is a gap there. Tyler Smith out of Tulsa, Daniel Falele out of Minnesota. Right? Then you get to wide receiver. Christian Watson, North Dakota State. Sky Moore, guy who visited the Saints out of Western Michigan. George Pickens, wide receiver out of Georgia, who's coming off an ACL injury. So this is where you kind of see, there are value players here. there are probably two starters that you can pull out of this group. But you are missing out on the Trevor Pennings, the Chris Olaves, the Jamison Williams, the Treylon Burks. So that is where you're going to get some grief. It's going to feel like a missed opportunity if you go into a draft with all of these top end names again and don't come out with any of them. But I do think there is money left in the sofa, or you can go out and you can get a Jarvis Landry, make the fans happy, add that legit wide receiver too, and go from there, and you don't feel like you have to chase anything here. If someone falls into your lap, if the top wide receiver on your board falls in your lap, you take him. But I think you can still be comfortable knowing that you can go out and get a guy. I still think that there's going to be a wide receiver off the board with the Saints. It's been too many years of just not valuing that position at the top end, and I think it's got to change. But that's kind of where we end up here. Again, there's 4 routes here that you could take, and that's not all of them. There are a lot more routes that you can go, but I wanted to go through these 4 and kind of go through the thought process so you get an idea of what we're looking at, what the Saints are looking at, and how they might go about this draft, which is going to be unique. It's the first draft without Sean Payton in 15, 16 years, right? And what we're going to learn in this draft and all subsequent drafts is how much of an impact did Sean Payton have in that war room, right? How many picks were Sean Payton driven that would not have been made had he not been in the room? Would different players have been selected if Mickey Loomis got his say, or if Dennis Allen got his say? Or that's what we're going to learn. We're going to see if some of these draft strategies, if avoiding wide receiver in the first round, if building out through the lines so extensively, if drafting a center when you already have a center, that sort of thing is going to change, or if that was more Mickey Loomis driven. That's what we're going to learn this year to some extent. We're going to see that kind of go forward, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the Saints build out their draft strategy in the post-Sean Payton era. We're going to have to wait a couple weeks to find out. Again, my name's Jeff Nowak, WWL Radio digital sports producer. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments. Make sure, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell. Tell me what you think over on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Make sure to check out WWL.com for the latest news, notes, and analysis. Make sure to check out Sports Talk 48 p.m. Monday through Friday, WWL AM 870 FM 105.3. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter at WWL AM FM. There's also a written version of this article. You can check it out over on WWL.com. I will link it in the description below. And we'll go from there. But that's going to be it. Thanks, y'all.